Kick it.
Ahoy, mateys, and welcome to This Week in Nickelodeon History. It's a pleasure to welcome you aboard. My name is Captain Eric, and we're covering some Nickelodeon anniversaries on this episode that have taken place in between the times of November 20th to November 26th. And before we start with the anniversaries on this week's episode, I'd like to acknowledge the passing of Kevin Conroy, the longtime voice actor of Batman, who you would be surprised did not stop by at Nickelodeon too many times in his career, but did voice the character of Prismal on 7 episodes of the Nicktoon Welcome to the Wayne. So my condolences to anyone out there of the Conroy family. Batman meant the world to me in such a deep and profound way, more than any Nicktoon, to be perfectly honest. He may have been right there alongside the Nicktoons when they were first introduced to me, but Batman has meant a lot, and right behind that, it means that Kevin Conroy's voice has meant a lot to me. I had a bit of a eulogy of sorts that I had for Kevin on I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast. Given his slight connection with Nickelodeon, it would be fair to acknowledge that here as well. So after today's episode, when you hear the end credits, after that is done, in its entirety, I will have everything that I said about Kevin from I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast at the end there, if you are interested. But for this week in Nickelodeon history, we are starting back all the way in the far gone year of 1996. 26 years ago, on November 24th, the final episode of Rocko's Modern Life premiered on Nickelodeon. This final episode was a Thanksgiving-themed episode, Turkey Time, followed by Floundering Fathers. Both of them had something to do with Thanksgiving in some way. Turkey Time, of course, the traditional Thanksgiving episode of Rocko's Modern Life. Floundering Fathers having something to do with who really founded O-Town, of course, with Thanksgiving being that whole story of the Pilgrims and the Indians. Oh, and the Pilgrims founded America, even though the Indians were here. Like, oh, hey, guys, we're taking over. Anyway, that was the final episode of the show up until Static Cling premiered on Netflix on August 9th, 2019. Despite this being the final episode that Nickelodeon aired, it is not the actual series finale of Rocko. If you would like to watch the actual series finale of Rocko's Modern Life that bleeds perfectly into Static Cling, then you're going to want to watch Future Schlock, which premiered right before the final episode, which then was the Thanksgiving one. I understand that Nickelodeon wanted to keep the Thanksgiving episode closer to the Thanksgiving season and have, more viewership around that time. It makes sense, but if you are watching the series and then going right into Static Cling, end with Future Schlock, go right into Static Cling. I love Rocko. I miss Rocko more every single day. It is a show that its legacy that it left behind is massive. And, I always talk about, of course, the sheer amount of adult humor that got through the censors at the time. And that is a part of its charm. It's a cartoon that you can enjoy as a kid and laugh and giggle at certain things at. And then you can be an adult, watch it in a completely new perspective, and find more things to laugh at. It's incredible. If you haven't watched Rocko since you were a child, there's not a Nicktoon I can point to say you should give this one another shot. Check it out. 4 seasons, 52 episodes, created by Joe Murray. And if you're a fan of SpongeBob SquarePants, this is the seeds being planted for everything that would end up being SpongeBob is right here in Rocko. You have Steven Hillenburg as some sort of creative force behind certain episodes and on the staff of Rocko. Tom Kenny, Mr. Lawrence. Some of the humor that would carry over into SpongeBob was cultivated here on Rocko. This is without a doubt one of the most iconic Nicktoons, and even its return just stuck the landing. Proof positive that if Joe Murray and crew really wanted to come back and just tell an entire new crop of stories of Rocko traversing the dangerous life of today's day and age, they could in tremendous fashion. I fully believe that. Even if they don't, completely fine. Everything we have is perfect. If you've never checked it out, I legitimately can't recommend it enough. 24 years ago, on November 20th, 1998, the Rugrats movie premiered in theaters. Directed by Igor Kovalov and Norton Vergine, the movie was made on a budget of $24 million and would go on to make $141 million at the box office. If I ever talk about the Rugrats movie and there is a bit of trivia I have to bring up, it's that the Rugrats movie was the very first non-Disney animated film to cross $100 million at the box office. The Rugrats, forever in history, that title can never be taken away, sits with Nickelodeon and the Rugrats as a claim that, hey, we're the first ones to show that other animation exists outside of Disney that can exist on theaters. And you know what? It's that accolade that really bums me out, seeing how the Nicktoon properties in theaters kind of swayed away. There really isn't an interest from the public. There's always this thing of, well, if I can see it for free on television, why do I have to pay for it on the big screen? You're not seeing it for free on television. You're paying for it with cable, with your package, with whatever service you have. Or if you're not paying for cable, you're paying for a streaming service, which has it available on there. In some way, you're paying to watch that show and you're just deciding, hey, my time is being spent watching this. It isn't really for free. And you know what? Seeing something on the big screen is an event. It's a moment. If obviously what you have to watch has to be good. But if it's good and you're sitting there and you're just seeing it on a big screen and you can't appreciate that, I don't know what to tell you. Especially when you see these shows go into extra effort in the animation. I know that there's the joke about the shadows just always being on there, but it's more than the shadows. The extra detail in the background, I love that stuff. I know it's cliche, but I'd like to see what some of these other Nicktoons would have looked like on the big screen. Our Real Monsters, Cat Dog, even though we got a taste right before the Rugrats movie with Fetch, which, hey, Nickelodeon, Paramount, released the official theatrical short in its entirety. High definition, come on, I know it's sitting on someone's computer out there. But, Cat Dog, Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom. I know Invader Zim. Can you imagine if they were allowed like a PG-13 theatrical movie? You know? If they were just, hey, allowed to go make a $30 million Invader Zim movie. Like, it's not going to make more than $30 million back at the box office. Come on now. So, I wish that wave lasted longer. I am grateful that we got more Nicktoons on the big screen than we, originally should have, I guess. We got Rugrats, we got the Wild Thornberrys, we got Hey Arnold, hey, Jimmy Neutron in some way if you then watched the show and then found the movie, even though the movie came first. Barnyard, so, hey, there's some examples there, but I wish there was just a few more of them. Fairly Odd Parents, more than others, could have looked amazing with that animation, just given that theatrical budget. Oh, that could have looked so good. Anyway, the Rugrats movie, my favorite of the trilogy. I know a lot of people prefer In Paris, but to me, just this story of the babies being lost in the woods, the parents freaking out. It's really, you're watching the series up to this point. Every time the babies go off on an adventure, the parents are completely oblivious to the fact. There is no freak out as where the babies are. And even it might happen in some little episode here and there where the parents are aware that the baby isn't here, like when Tommy and Chucky were left in Toyland and Stu and Chaz were freaking out. Where's our kids? There are moments like that happen, but for the most part, Grandpa, Stu, Dee Dee, they're oblivious to some of the adventures that happen. So now you have national news coming in to showcase the fact that their children are lost and that are possibly in the woods. It's a massive, serious, theatrical story. I love the first Rugrats movie. I think that in Paris, there's too many bells and whistles around the core of the story, which I know is about Chucky and the loss of his mom and that missing piece of his life. And I know that hits a lot of people's hearts, but I just prefer this one. I love the story of Tommy having to go through maturity a little bit there and being a big brother. I myself am a big brother, so that connection to this movie has just increased over time. And even in some way, that idea of passing on responsibility and explaining that to a child, your future son. If I ever have a son, I'll reflect on this movie even more. And if you didn't hear the news recently that the Rugrats movie was officially re-released on Blu-ray, I can confirm and will show off in a future YouTube video for a series that I'm working on. It has the cleanest transfer of the original theatrical cells and colors that unfortunately through VHS and DVD means over time and not really given the care haven't, been shown off in its best way. Haven't seen the Blu-ray version, completely different experience in watching that movie. They finally have the color grading correct of the skin tones of the characters. In a lot of the DVD versions, they look really gray and sick, but in the Blu-ray version, they fixed that. Can't recommend it enough if you can find it on Amazon or however. This is not an ad, I'm just saying. If you're a fan, it's the best way to watch that movie, and it's available now. I cannot recommend it enough if you haven't seen it. 21 years ago, on November 25th, 2001, we had the premiere of Action League Now, the series. A spin-off of the Action League Now shorts that aired alongside Kablam and All That. If some don't remember, there were actually some Action League Now segments on All That, which really gave it more of that SNL feel. And I wish they did more outside of the studio shorts on All That. At the time, especially with the cast they had. Anyway, Action League Now was a popular series of shorts that had very limited stop-motion animation, which was called Chuckimation, which was a combination of stop-frame animation and live-action shots, which were simply, things where there were characters standing around and items would get thrown at them or things would happen. It's like, pseudo animation in a way. It's a crazy mixture of different techniques to achieve one of the weirdest shows Nickelodeon has ever had on the air. Action League Now is the story of 4 superheroes, and everybody is action figures living in a house where you don't necessarily see people, but they occupy their time doing really mundane, stupid tasks while also saving the day. Sometimes there are action figures out there that get stuck in the toilet. Sometimes there's action figures almost going to fall into a blender. And it's these 4 that step in to stop those evil acts, although since this is a show that is all about the destruction of these figures, almost every time they tease an incident happening where a piece of plastic is going to get run over by a lawnmower or thrown or exploded or destroyed, it usually ends up happening. That's a guarantee with this show. The entire show is revolved around the mayor who is the villain and causing most of the atrocities that happen in this household, and the team that is designed to stop him. The Flesh, he's super strong and super naked. A He-Man-like action figure with no clothes on. A homage to many action figures and Barbie dolls out there in toy rooms that lose their clothing to never put them back on. Thunder Girl, she flies like thunder. Thunder Girl is a superhero Barbie doll-ish action figure where she has the head of a Barbie with that kind of flowy hair that you could design, but her entire torso down is that of just this, like if you mixed Wonder Woman and the Flash together, and her entire gimmick is that she's able to fly, and she is able to fly. The next team member, Stinky Diver, a former Navy commando with an attitude as bad as his odor. A G.I. Joe-looking diver figure who is my favorite character throughout the entire show. The final member of the crew is Meltman, with the power to melt. Meltman is the most unique of the crew because he doesn't really look like any known, line of action figures that you could point to and go, hey, that looks like that. Meltman looks kind of like a G.I. Joe size figure, but his entire body has been melted, like a kid taking a magnifying glass and just melting sides of his body. But I guess Meltman is also able to do that at will. Other than that, the chief comes in who gives them the orders to let them know, when the mayor is attacking the town or is doing this or that. Action League now, the series, is not really made up of any new episodes of the show because the way the episodes aired on Kablam were in two parts. One part would air in the beginning of Kablam through some other segments and commercial breaks. They would leave it at a cliffhanger and you would go back to finish the episode. In a similar fashion, they would air those shorts in this series, but in between the cliffhanger moments, they would have news segments with the characters reading out like fan mail from, viewers out there, asking questions to the Flesh, asking questions to Stinky Diver, and, everything was just sewn together into just a completely new show. As a package series, there was only one season of 12 episodes.
Action League, now starring The Flesh. He's super strong and super naked. Thunder Girl, she flies like thunder. Stinky Diver, a former Navy commando with an attitude as bad as his odor. And Meltman, with the power to melt.
17 years ago, on November 23rd, 2005, the Nickelodeon movie Yours, Mine, and Ours premiered in theaters. Directed by Raja Gosnell, the movie was made on a $45 million budget and made $72.7 million at the box office. Also 17 years ago, on November 25th, 2005, The X's premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Carlos Ramos, the show ran for one season of 20 episodes. The X's, one of the most forgotten Nicktoons in history. The show only ran for that one season, and here's what's crazy. 16 years ago, on November 25th, 2006, it finished its run. One full calendar year, bell to bell, episode to episode. That is at least impressive. But the X's, unfortunately, just didn't hit audiences for some reason. I loved the animation style of the show. It went for a really unique animation style, and I love the voice cast behind this project. Patrick Warburton, Chris Hardwick, Tom Kane, Stephen Root, Randy Savage.
But the cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
If you want the Captain Eric to watch a cartoon, you put Randy Savage on, Ooh, yeah.
Too hot to handle and too cold to hold.
Let me tell you, I was a fan of the X's. I also understand why it was forgotten. I didn't have many other friends who watched it. And at the time, it was kind of where I started waning off of Nickelodeon a little bit, so I wasn't watching it as much as I was, even just a few years prior. So I get it, but the fact that it's not talked about is really bothersome. So I want more people to talk about the X's. I want more people to check it out. It's only 20 episodes, not that bad of a watch. And shout out to Chris Hardwick, who had to keep up the worst voice possible for that entire run of the show. It's like, in the realm of voices for a series, what would you not want? The voice that Chris Hardwick had as Glowface is among, it's got to be among the top of what you wouldn't want, but just kudos for him to having to hold that up for the entire series. The X's, check it out if you can, and if you can't, well, you're listening to this, so what's your excuse now? Yeah, I said it. 16 years ago, on November 25th, 2006, we had the final episode of The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Created by John A. Davis, the show ran for 3 seasons of 61 episodes. Jimmy Neutron started out years prior as a proof of concept of how we can make animation in computers. And upon his arrival, and among many different designs and names, including Johnny Quasar, when the public eventually saw Jimmy Goddard in his rocket, that piece of animation blew the minds of everyone who laid their eyes upon it. It was just undeniable that this was going to be something. Eventually, this project made its way to Nickelodeon, who was committed, due to the animation here, to make not only a television series, but a theatrical film. And upon knowing this, the creators and the creative minds behind the scenes of Jimmy Neutron knew the smart way to do this was to start with a film, because all of the models and all of the backgrounds and the creations that they make for the movie, they'll be able to reuse for the TV show. So upon the TV show's arrival, they'll already have, they'll be in a better footing than if they had a TV show to work on, and then they get a movie and they have to doll it up a little bit more. So it was a smart means, and it worked out in their favor. Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, massive hit in theaters. And then The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius premieres on July 20th, 2005. Is a massive hit every single season on Nickelodeon. As far as I knew, and talking with other fans, everybody seemed to love the show. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hours were among the most talked about pieces of Nickelodeon entertainment, all 3 of them. And for some reason, Jimmy was just tossed by the wayside. At the same time as the Fairly Odd Parents. After the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3, it was like, hey guys, even though that the third one may not be everyone's favorite, it was still entertaining. It was still fun to see characters in different styles. I would have loved to see a 4th one. I'd be fine with more of those happening, bringing in another Nicktoon like Danny Phantom. But nope. Here's the 3rd movie. It premieres. There's a handful of episodes for each series left. And it just takes a few months. They just batch release all those episodes. And cancellation came for both Jimmy Neutron and the Fairly Odd Parents. A few months later, though, it was the Fairly Odd Parents who got renewed. And Butch has mentioned that it wasn't even the first time that they had been canceled in that run up to that point. So many times weren't even known. But here's a proposal to continue with Cosmo and Wanda having a baby. And that goes on to be the Fairly Odd Baby. But there was a chunk of time in between that last season and Fairly Odd Baby where they were done. The show was over. And at the same time, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius was dropped, even though there were plans for a 4th season. And that was it. Everybody move on, clean up shop. Why? It's a computer animated show. You have the models. You're literally like, yeah, they're probably making new models and animating more, but it's an easier to produce show in some way than a traditional animated show where every single episode you're making from scratch other than reusing backgrounds and such. Every new piece of animation on the front, all those cells, all those characters moving. I don't know. Feel like it was just a dumb move to drop Jimmy at the time, especially when CGI animation was still on the rise. And although it was limited, Jimmy Neutron has a lot of charm to it. I have a lot of love for this show. The top 5 of this week is going to be about Jimmy Neutron, so there'll be more to talk about. So I won't drag this on. We'll move on to the next show. But if you haven't seen The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, you just should. You just should. 10 years ago, on November 23rd, 2012, we had the final episode of iCarly, and it aired on Nickelodeon. This was of the original run before it was rebooted on Paramount Plus. The show was created by Schneider, and it ran for 6 seasons of 97 episodes. Oh, wait, hold on. No, I had to double check. I thought that was including the reboot. 97th episode was I Goodbye, and it aired on November 23rd, 2012, before eventually being rebooted on Paramount Plus last year. And it is honestly a decent reboot because it's not just a rehash of the sitcom formula with the same characters who happen to be older. It is legitimately a show that aged up with its audience. So although it's the same environments and they're the same characters, hey, they're older. They're dealing with different things. Parenting, dating, real life stuff. And I actually really enjoy that. I really do. I would love to see that happen with other Nickelodeon shows. I know that Keenan and Kel have been talking about Good Burger too, but I recently saw Keenan talk about that if they ever wanted to reboot Keenan and Kel, it would have to be a drastically different show. And yeah, what is Keenan Rockmore and Kel Kimball doing, in their 40s and their 50s? What's going on? How are things going? I would love to see that. It would be an enjoyable show. At least I would think so. If they produced it in the right way, it of course, I guess anything produced in the right way could be enjoyable. But regardless, 10 years ago, on November 24th, 2012, we had the premiere of Marvin Marvin on Nickelodeon, created by John Ross and Jeff Bushell. I messed that up. Jeff Bushell. The show ran for 1 season of 19 episodes. Marvin Marvin was another starring role for Lucas Cruikshank, who is best known for playing the character of Fred Figglehorn, who at one point in time was the #1 YouTuber. And at a point in time where anytime someone became the #1 YouTuber, you also became the most hated YouTuber because you were the most seen, you were the most shown for a while, and then somebody else would take your spot and so on and so forth. But to Lucas's credit, for a kid who just had a camera and decided, I'm going to make up this character and put it up for free on the internet, he created a pretty good career for himself. I hope he's proud of that road he walked on. He, has talked about it. It certainly wasn't easy. But I might not love the Fred character, but I appreciate the fact that he was able to create something. It reached a wide audience. Those who watched it, enjoyed it. Those who subscribed were fans. And it got him to the point where Nickelodeon came along and said, hey, let's make a movie with this character. You got 3 movies out of that deal, 1 season of a TV show, and then, hey, there's another TV show here that, you get to be a part of. 1 season of 19 episodes is nothing to scoff at. There are shows that don't go past the pilot. So 19 episodes, hey, I'll take it. Marvin Marvin finished its run on April 27th, 2013. This is an exciting one. 6 years ago, on November 26th, 2016, Legends of the Hidden Temple premiered on Nickelodeon. And I'm not talking about the game show. This is a movie directed by Joe Menendez, and it was an adaptation of the game show, treating the Hidden Temple as a real location with a real Olmec inside of it, and Kirk Fogg as simply a guide in an amusement park with the Hidden Temple a part of this massive attraction. And what a way to reinvigorate this idea, to take this idea with so much potential of the Hidden Temple, that entire playscape area, and just imagine that being a real thing, and then making a movie out of it. Genius idea. This is exactly the kind of thing that if I was running Nickelodeon, I would do. It's the proper kind of synergy. Not like, hey, let's reboot everything that we have, but that's an interesting idea. We have this game show with this lore that we kind of built within it. Let's make a movie around that. And Olmec, absolutely perfect character that fits into a big budget live action movie. I hope in another way we're able to see Olmec in another movie, voiced again by the one and only D. Bradley Baker. And of course, Kirk Fogg being back as himself in a kind of a new way. I haven't watched the movie since it premiered, but I'll tell you, after watching it, I was pretty satisfied. I should rewatch this at some point, but we're in the December season, holiday season coming up. I meant Christmas instead of December, but I'll find some time to watch Legends again. A show that I don't need a time of year to watch, a movie, I should say. One that premiered 5 years ago on November 24th, 2017. Hey Arnold, The Jungle Movie. The return of Hey Arnold was directed by Rami Muzquiz and Stu Livingston, and was the long-promised cliffhanger finishing ending of Hey Arnold that we waited 15 or so years for. When Hey Arnold was being worked on, the crew had 2 movie projects that they were producing. One called Arnold Saves the Neighborhood, which was being made as a TV movie, and Arnold the Jungle Movie, Hey Arnold the Jungle Movie, which I guess during conversations with Paramount, they were kind of saying, hey, we're going to, make a movie with you. So they were making the Jungle Movie as this big theatrical ending to the entire Hey Arnold story, with Arnold Saves the Neighborhood being a nice little TV movie that would air at some point, probably during the summertime of some Nickelodeon season. Now, when Paramount and Nickelodeon saw 2 movies being made, well, that's just money to their ears. Hey guys, you have this movie already made for TV. Well, let's just throw some extra money at it, and we'll release it in theaters. And we'll call it Hey Arnold the Movie. And when it makes money, we'll then just make the Jungle Movie. And now you have a sequel. Boom. And that was the direction that everybody decided to go into. Hey Arnold the Movie premiered in theaters, and even though I would say it was a hit by making at least $15.2 million at the box office on at upwards $4 million budget. I can't imagine they spent too much on marketing, because I didn't see much as a kid. But, when you look at $15 million and compare that to the Rugrats movie we already talked about, $141 million, you can understand why at this point maybe they weren't jazzed to put Nicktoons in the theaters anymore. I would say that it was due to marketing more than anything else, as to, people not pushing Hey Arnold. But also, the movie wasn't really made for theaters. It was made for TV. And what really sucks is that because they had this plan of the Jungle Movie, the Hey Arnold series ended on a cliffhanger of Arnold learning the entire story of his parents, why they're not around, and right at the end, finding a map to their location in San Lorenzo, a fictional, jungle-ish country out in South America. That's how the show ended. And for a show as big as Hey Arnold, for that story to not be resolved until 2017 is a crime, but it at least happened. I remember the few years where there were announcements after announcements of these just new and interesting ways to reboot and bring back old Nickelodeon properties. Legends of the Hidden Temple, Hey Arnold, Rocko's Modern Life, Invader Zim. Then they kind of stopped, and I think they should continue with Cat Dog. And hey, we can handle meta humor now, guys. How about we finish that Angry Beavers series finale and then maybe give it a little bit more polish just for some extra time missed. But this is unprecedented that a show of this caliber was allowed to end like this, and we were just not given any sort of closure. We were told by the creator, a few plot points that would happen, and during the planning process, what they were going to make with the Jungle movie, but it just ceased to exist. Paramount was not interested in making a sequel, and that was it. Up until the new regime at Nickelodeon decided, let's go back into our catalog, and it was undeniable that one of the first Nicktoons, if you're going to go back to any Nicktoon, you've got to finish this story. And they did. So kudos to Nickelodeon for allowing this to happen, for getting this made. And it's a beautiful Hey Arnold sequel. It really is. I love some of the new subtle character designs to just address the change in time, even though in their world it may have only been a couple of months up to a year. I enjoy just the animation, the emotion at the end. It's a beautiful end to Hey Arnold. Even if it never comes back for another season, it's still better than having just a cliffhanger ending being fairly unanswered, which happens far too often. But for Hey Arnold, it was a legitimate crime, in my opinion at least. 4 years ago, on November 20th, 2018, Keep It Spotless finished its run on Nickelodeon. The competition series was presented by Melissa Vanderschiff and ran for one season of 20 episodes. It was also created by Simon Crossley. 5 years ago, this probably should have went before Keep It Spotless, but it's okay. 5 years ago, on November 26, 2017, the final Nickelodeon Halo Awards premiered across most Nickelodeon channels. The big reason for the Halo Awards was to showcase, it originally started as the Teen Nick Halo Awards, and it aired on Teen Nick exclusively from 2009 up until 2013. 2014, it was rebranded as the straight-up Nickelodeon Halo Awards, and then just aired across most Nickelodeon channels except for TV Land and Nick Jr. The show was around acknowledging teenagers for doing good things in their community, for the experiences that they're putting out there, the good experiences, the positivity, and every single teen would receive some sort of cash prize to further their education or would be able to donate that cash to a charity of their choice. Every year there was about 4 teenagers that they would select and showcase around this show. And Nick Cannon, the original host and I guess owner and founder of Teen Nick, was the original host of this show. All the way in 2017, though, I guess among the teenagers that they were showcasing, Kelly Clarkson was also awarded the Halo Hall of Fame Award and performed at the show. I love Kelly Clarkson. She's one of my favorites. But yeah, that was a bit weird where they started like, let's celebrate celebrities a little bit more. But hey, I guess if it's Kelly Clarkson, I'm not going to complain about that. But yeah, that was the final Halo Awards in 2017. 4 years ago, on November 24th, 2018, we had the premiere of Cousins for Life on Nickelodeon. Created by Kevin Koplo and Heath Seifert, the show ran for one season of 20 episodes. Last year, 1 year ago, on November 26th, 2021, we had the premiere of A Loud House Christmas, a live-action Loud House film based off of the Nicktoon The Loud House, created by Chris Savino. The show, or movie, I should say, was directed by Jonathan Judge, and as far as I know, was enough of a hit across its airings on Nickelodeon and streaming on Paramount Plus for Nickelodeon to want to keep all of these actors together to continue the live action adventures of the Loud family with the Really Loud House, a spin-off show of, hey, these characters just continuing on. And you know what? The look of the characters, they got them down for the most part. For as many of the characters in the Loud House that they had to cover, it's pretty impressive that they were able to get all of these guys together, these gals, these actors, and it all works out. So why not? If they're there and the movie has big numbers and there is an audience for it, I know there's negativity for it, but I accept this more than the Fairly Odder show. That to me is like, that's really crossing the line there. But that is this week in Nickelodeon history. That is all of our anniversaries. And for my top 5 of the week, I'm going to give you my top 5 Jimmy Neutron episodes. And ironically enough, I was going through like, oh, there's some season 1 stuff here, some season 2. Not much in season 3. It's not that I don't love that season, but apparently, you know, it's not my favorite. But number 5 here, Phantom of Retroland. I love a little spooky, a little bit of horror in some of my cartoons, and this is an early season 1 episode with the characters sneaking into the local amusement park to debunk a local urban legend. And that already, like, I love that concept. The fact that Jimmy and the crew break into Retroland, all of the extra effort from some of the other characters to keep this urban legend alive. I genuinely love this episode. Number 4, Crunch Time. I think this is season 2, if I remember correctly. Jimmy, if you're going to have Boy Genius able to create legitimately anything, what a concept of Jimmy creating the absolute perfect candy created of a mixture of every single flavor or texture that we associate with candy. What does the perfect candy that can be sour, sweet, chocolatey, tangy, like, what is that? And when Jimmy creates it, it legitimately is like a drug that everybody in town who even tries one flavor or one taste of this piece of candy just can't get enough of. Actually, yeah, this is a season 1 episode. This is right after Phantom of Retroland, a couple episodes after. Number 3, Men at Work, a season 2 episode that sees Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen take up a job at a local fast food restaurant, McSpanky's. Big McThankies from McSpanky's. I love this episode, the jokes that are associated with it. Of course, we can't forget Skeet, the employee of the month, and his unknowing of sodium chloride.
Actually, dude, it's salt.
That's what I said, sodium chloride.
Dude, that would be salt.
That's what I said. Jeez. But need I say more? This is a classic episode. Absolutely iconic. Number 2, though, is Grumpy Young Men, because once again, if you're going to have a character that can create anything, well, as a kid, one of these options would be, hey, make ourselves look older so we can, you know, buy mature video games. We can go into rated R movies. We can do whatever we want. And when that experiment goes haywire, unfortunately, they are aging rapidly than they expected. So by the time the characters of Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen wake up after this experiment, they are old, elderly men. And this episode makes me laugh every single time I see it. There is always a reason to put this episode on if you need a good laugh. This would be the funniest episode, I would say, for so many reasons. But it's not my favorite. My favorite is for something deeper because it is an invention of Jimmy Neutron's that I would probably be the most interested in trying out. And I would risk all of the negative effects to try this machine out. But my number 1 episode is Ultra Sheen. Jimmy and Sheen use a machine that lets you go into your favorite video games and play along with the main characters. And of course, Sheen is able to bring over an Ultra Lord video game that he, I guess, always has in his back pocket. And Jimmy and Sheen go through this Ultra Lord video game that the only way to get out of is by beating it. So they're forced to continually try, and Carl eventually is on the outside messing things up. It's my favorite episode for just so many reasons. Beyond the invention, I love the entire aspect of Ultra Lord in this episode. Yes, I do want to be your battle buddy. And that is going to be it for this week in Nickelodeon history proper. And I know this has been a long episode. I've just had a ton of fun talking with you guys. Legitimately, when it goes this on and I ramble, I'm having fun. I'm imagining you guys here sitting on the ship. I'm at the front, and we're just talking. We're enjoying and celebrating some Nickelodeon anniversaries. But I love to celebrate also the life of Kevin Conroy. So if you just want to end this week in Nickelodeon history, I'm going to play the ending credits theme. But right after that, I will have the eulogy of sorts that I read out for Kevin Conroy from I'm Ready, episode 141, all about the episode Funny Pants. So the segment after the end credits theme will be from that episode. It's all about Kevin Conroy, how much he means to me. So if you are a Captain Eric fan and you'd like to know a little bit more about who I am and a little bit more about my life, that's thrown in there, as well as a celebration for the greatest Batman to ever exist and his life. Thank you for joining me this week, and we will see you here next week.
On the Lord Hut, here hut, Nick. On the Lord Hut, here hut, Nick, Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living number one Nickelodeon. You are not my father. I am not a disgrace. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
When I was growing up, if I wasn't playing Sonic the Hedgehog on my Genesis, I had one of three fictional characters on my television screen. The three Bs: Big Bird, Barney, and Batman. I'll always hold a special place in my heart for those other two, but undeniably for any young kid, the introduction of Batman can be a life-changing moment. He's objectively cool in most of his iterations, and has undeniably the most iconic rogues gallery of any single superhero to ever exist. Batman wasn't always on this level of cool and iconic for the mainstream audience of this world, and it wasn't until 1989's Batman film, the one directed by Tim Burton, that opened the collective third eye of a whole new generation into the world of Gotham, and the realization that within the pages of DC's comic books over the years, some of the greatest stories of the Caped Crusader have been told, beautifully drawn, and no longer was the public perception of Batman as a goofy and campy television property to continue, but to, as we know him today, as one of the greatest literary stories with some of the greatest adaptations in all of entertainment in so many different mediums. Batman has some of the greatest comic books, movies, television shows, and there's not a single other superhero out there like him. Growing up in the 90s, other than the live-action Tim Burton films of the time, the one piece of Batman media that was widely circulated was the 1992 Bruce Timm produced Batman the Animated Series. What Tim Burton's film did for the audience who only knew Batman as Adam West, rest in peace, the animated series did for Batman for those who only knew of him from those early DC animated television shows like Super Friends, and it just brought an entire new landscape to the world of Gotham, a whole new world to play in, and it completely changed the game and revolutionized how to adapt a comic book into an animated series. How insanely lucky were we in the 90s that a mere almost 2 months later, the X-Men animated series would drop, and that's iconic in its own right, so both of them happening within the same time frame is insane. But although I certainly wasn't watching the premiere of those shows at the time, once they were on video and regularly on television, I was hooked on the adventures of this millionaire who wanted nothing to do with his wealth other than to be a superhero at night. And as a kid, it wasn't just watching Batman take down a continually growing rogues gallery of colorful characters and, the ongoing pursuit of his greatest nemesis, the Joker, voiced by Mark Hamill, who is the beautiful counterweight to Batman in this series, and his cohort in crime, Harley Quinn, who is actually created for this series. And, I mentioned this show is iconic, but think about that. I'm not even at the iconic part, and I already mentioned the debut of Harley Quinn. When writing a good story, there are writers out there who can certainly keep you at the edge of your seat and your eyes glued to the page. But for as long as acting has been around, it's not simply words that can take an audience and keep their interests. It takes an extra level of performance, and not just being able to simply use your voice, but know on how to use your voice and when to use it properly, being conscious of a deeper level of the story that the audience themselves may not be aware of. Good performers think deeply about the characters they play, fill in the gaps in their head, and connect the dots for emotion, and are able to convey that either on stage, in front of a crowd, on a movie set or TV set in front of a crew, or in a booth with a team of sound engineers and directors. Kevin Conroy, born November 30th, 1955, was the actor who was handed the baton to play the role of Bruce Wayne, and simply didn't just wave that baton around in standard motions that everybody would expect, but stared lovingly at that baton, put care into holding that baton, and moved that baton in ways that to this day are felt around the world in such an unspoken manner. It's simply not enough to embody a rich playboy by day and a vigilante badass by night to play Batman. And it's not just playing a young boy continually dealing with the loss of his parents. There is so much more going on behind Bruce Wayne than there is time to divulge into that here. But each and every one of you who have dealt with trauma in their past would probably feel off if somebody tried to conceptualize your life in only a few sentences. There are so many layers on top of us, and with what Bruce Wayne went through as a kid, you have to imagine that to unpack that emotional baggage, it would take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And in my opinion, Kevin Conroy is the only man who has been able to fully unpack that baggage and has been able to reorganize it in a way that works for him, and is able to fully embody not only that Bruce Wayne and those decisions that he makes as Bruce with that sadness behind him, but how to vocally carry that over into Batman, how to distinguish between the two so seamlessly, and for it to be sensible in the world. You can understand how Commissioner Gordon could have a conversation with Bruce Wayne and then meet up with Batman later that night, and it doesn't sound overly goofy. Voice actors do not get enough credit for their role in this country and for their role in the arts, for their role in entertainment. And I'll give you one example with Kevin Conroy on just how deep a voice actor's role can mean to somebody. Being a child of divorce, my parents divorced amicably when I was young, and still to this day maintain a strong relationship to some degree. But for a young kid around the age of 4 or 5, it still is a pretty tough thing to deal with. And subconsciously, when I'm watching the Batman animated series at the time, and my dad is bringing me to comic book stores on the weekends, and I'm buying Batman comic books, I didn't realize this, but the idea that Bruce Wayne as a kid could go through such a tragedy, but could grow up and then just want to make sure that no one else has to feel the way he did that night, is in so many ways how I feel right now as a person. I've gone through some pretty rough experiences, and at the end of the day, I would love to create or be a part of things that can, hey, just like these shows helped me get through rough days and rough times, especially in the world of Batman, I want to help be a part of that and help someone else out there who might be dealing with something very much in a Batman-like way. Except I'm not going out at night and getting out in a car and in a suit and trying to be a vigilante. But subconsciously, that's why I was attached to that character so much. It wasn't just because it's Batman and being a superhero. And when I'm reading all of those comic books that I'm getting with my father on the weekends in various stores throughout the state, we would just travel and visit places. No one told me to start using Kevin Conroy's voice as Batman. When I was reading these comic books, I had experienced Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. I had experienced Kevin Conroy. I had seen the Adam West Batman movie. I had seen the old cartoons. I had many different Batmen to choose from. But subconsciously, I chose Kevin Conroy. So all throughout my childhood, I am reading these comic books, and it's just Kevin Conroy in the back of my mind. It's Mark Hamill as the Joker in the back of my mind reading these books. No one's telling me to do this, and so many other people out there are having the same experience as me. And it's not even just like, oh, it's a 90s thing. Kevin Conroy's role as Batman extends in the 2000s through continually playing Bruce Wayne in the same animated universe, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited. Then you have the Arkham games in the later 2000s, the early 2010s, some of the greatest video game adaptations of any fictional character. The Arkham Asylum games would be up there in the top 10. Asylum in particular. I love that first one. I know in varying degrees they get better, but that first one is just iconic to me. And here I am as an adult playing a Batman video game. Here's Kevin Conroy. Yet again. And it's because, honestly, of that role in the back of my mind that Kevin plays that I feel a deeper feeling for this loss. That it's simply just being, hey, a voice actor passed away. Here's this character they played, and it's beyond just what the character means to me. But 20 years from now, when I read a Batman comic book, I'm going to be thinking of Kevin. Kevin Conroy's voice, his manner, his demeanor, everything about how he comes off as both Bruce Wayne and Batman will play out in my head. And it's just, this is the voice I subconsciously decided for the rest of my life. And I'm just blessed to have that, because it would be a blessing to have just one recording of the perfect Batman. But there's decades of his vocal work to look at and choose from and to listen. And it will certainly be remembered for years to come. I have no concern about that. Everybody is going to have their Batman that they use, and I am just blessed that this was my Batman. I am absolutely blessed, grateful. I was honored to meet Kevin Conroy a few years ago at a convention, and regardless of the line that was waiting for this man, it was worth every single minute before I was in front of him. And although you weren't given, a lot of time to interact, he signed what I brought. I was able to thank him for his contributions to the world and what he means to me. And he embraced me, made me feel in that moment like, like he genuinely cared for his fans. And I hope, knowing that to be able to portray Bruce Wayne and bring that sadness, he had to pull from some emotional places for that performance. And I just hope that he was able to truly feel the importance that just that role brought to so many people. And when I say unspoken manner, it is due to how many of us read comic books hear Kevin Conroy's voice, we might not even say anything. How many people out there hear his voice when reading a Batman story and you've just never told anybody, oh, I hear Kevin Conroy's voice when I'm reading this and it's Batman? I'm sure it could be other Batman for you out there, but from Kevin's own perspective, from his own words, it does take a deal of sadness behind the facade of Batman to properly nail the performance of Bruce Wayne. And regardless on what kind of suit he's in and who he's talking to, that sadness, that pain is behind his face. It's behind the decisions he makes. And Kevin, being human, certainly pulled those emotions from someplace in his own experiences. And through that performance on television for people to watch, in video games for people to play, or anything else Batman related where they heard his voice, it just helped resonate for generations of fans of Batman. I don't think this is more evident, though, than this story from Kevin Conroy himself, who was volunteering at a soup kitchen somewhere in New York City after the tragic events that took place at the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. This was a few days afterwards. Someone within the soup kitchen eventually figured out that he was the voice actor, Kevin Conroy, and coaxed it out of him in conversation. After receiving confirmation, this individual shouted out to the room that the man that's been serving them for, a few days or so was Batman. And there was this silence in the room. Then there was a few jeers in the back of some claiming BS and for him to prove it. And there's one Batman line that, of course, Kevin will belt out anytime he needs to prove that he is, of course, Batman. I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman. He belted it out, and there's another silence that trickles over the room before a joyous eruption. And this just feeling of, in that moment, everything was okay. Somebody else in the room later on walked up to Kevin and they asked him, how does it feel to be Santa Claus? And I don't think I could bring up any other story that could just show you the kind of guy Kevin Conroy was, volunteering at a time like that. And wasn't talking about this story days afterwards, wasn't on radio or shouting out, hey, I did this. This was something he brought up years after the fact. And I think about it, and yeah, he is essentially Santa Claus for me. He's brought me more joy than the actual Santa Claus. And guess what? Kevin Conroy existed. I met him. I embraced him. He was a real man. And Santa being a idea, of course, can bring so much joy to the world. But guess what? So does Batman. And out of all of the Batman out there, most will agree that Kevin Conroy was Bruce Wayne, was Batman, and cemented that many times over, time and time again. It also helped to have the best Joker in Mark Hamill, and, of course, other villains, a whole myriad of characters that just really made a cement in those early Batman animated series episodes like Mr. Freeze. Who could forget? Characters that were just breathed an entire new life through that series. And it's because of Kevin and his performance that helped nail characters like Mr. Freeze, who were built with a more emotional connection between Batman and the issue at hand. It wasn't just simply, you're breaking the law, I'm taking you in. There was something else that was going on out there. Those who have worked with him have poured their hearts out on social media to give you even more insight on who this man was. And his work speaks for itself. Even up to this year, with the release of Multiverses, the legacy of Kevin Conroy as Batman will continue moving forward. Thank you, Tony, for that. And I gotta say, guys, as sad as I am to say goodbye to my Batman, I am grateful to have him as my Batman in the first place. Kevin, wherever you are, thank you for what you've brought to my life. I love you, and I will continually hear your voice as the Cape Crusader, the Dark Knight, for many stories to come. I know I'm not alone in that sentiment, and I also know that future generations will have no trouble at all in understanding why Kevin Conroy is revered in this role so much. Thank you for all of you who have listened through this. This means the world to me. Batman means a lot in the same way SpongeBob does. They're both characters that have a deeper love in my soul. And it is really due to their voice actors, along with the writing that comes behind them. But their voice actors mean the world to me. So thank you for all of you. Thank you to Kevin Conroy. Rest in peace, sir. You will be missed. And thank you for joining me on this week's episode of I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast. Please stay safe, be kind to one another, and come aboard again next week to another episode.
Yeah, I mean, I am vengeance, I am the night. You know, that's the iconic line. So many of the lines that I loved most are the ones that reveal the soul of Batman, because he's such a dark character, and it's all about the pain that resides in him. So, like, I think the best Batman movie of all of them, the live action and the animated, is Mask of the Phantasm, which was the first animated Batman movie, because it shows the whole arc of the development of the character. And you see what happened to him as a child, and then he has this scene at his parents' grave where he's begging with them to release him from his vow, because he's fallen in love for the first time in his life with Andrea Beaumont, and he didn't think he'd ever be able to love. And he's breaking down. And that scene, I loved that scene, and I loved playing it, and I was really proud of it, because you have to show the humanity of the man. Those moments where it shows his humanity and the struggle within him are the lines that I've had the most fun with.